Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. I'm joined now by J. Christian Adams from the Public Interest Legal Foundation. We're going to talk about a chilling new report his organization just released. But first, I wrote at Breitbart this week about the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, screwing up ballots intended to be sent to troops. You may have seen this. The ballots listed President Trump's running mate is Jeremy Cohen. Cohen is running for vice president on the Libertarian ticket with Joe Jorgensen. Mike Pence was completely omitted from the ballot. Jorgensen didn't have a running mate listed, so there were a total of 3 errors on the single ballot. J. Christian Adams, what's your reaction to that?
Well, when it comes to Jocelyn Benson, nothing surprises me. She is a Secretary of State that is deeply partisan, and sometimes the most partisan are the most incompetent. And so this doesn't surprise me because, frankly, it's very hard to fix. There's a way to do it in federal law, but it's very obscure. It's called the federal postcard. A soldier or sailor overseas can maybe send a postcard ballot, but they don't probably know about that. So this is really problematic.
So the Public Interest Legal Foundation this week put out a report titled Critical Condition, American Voter Rolls Filled with Errors, Dead Voters, and Duplicate Registrations. The report found in Michigan in 2016, there were 7,140 same address duplicates showing second vote credit. What exactly does that mean?
What that means is people are getting to register to vote multiple times, which falls on Jocelyn Benson for screwing that up. And not only are they registering multiple times, they're casting multiple ballots. These are people with the exact same birth date, exact same first, last name, middle initial, at the same address, sometimes at a slightly different address. Michigan voter rolls are a mess, and that's exactly why Michigan should not be doing mail balloting until they clean up their act. It's a disaster. We sued Detroit and found all manner of chaos, which I'm sure surprises everybody, on the voter rolls there. I mean, there was voter registration without addresses, just like down the block, or no first names, or people who showed they were born in 1823. It was just a disaster.
So what steps should a state like Michigan take to try and clean that up?
Okay, here comes the magic moment, Kyle. Here comes the very complicated and sophisticated and expensive process that they could do that we did. Sort your voter rolls by address. How about that? Put them in an Excel spreadsheet and sort them by address and see who's all crammed into one house. That's something state election officials never seem to think of, and that's one of the ways that we were able to catch so many duplicates on the rolls. And all you got to do is sort it by address. We did that for Detroit, and we found just insane numbers of people registered to vote more than once.
So I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So when you have a Rock the Vote is out on a campus and they're saying, register to vote, and a student at Michigan State says, okay, I'll register to vote. And so they register to vote. They put in their address in East Lansing, but they live in Detroit. Does that sort of supersede? Does the East Lansing supersede registration supersede Detroit? Or are there suddenly 2 registrations? How does that work?
Well, it's called an intrastate registration, and usually if it's through DMV and things are being done correctly, and that's the big if, Kyle, if things are being done correctly, then the state will detect that this is a duplicate registration and move the Detroit registration to East Lansing. Unfortunately, what's actually happening is it's not happening, is that the new registration is just set up as a second one. And so, Joe Sophomore at Ann Arbor, who lives in Bloomfield Hills, is registered in Bloomfield Hills and in Ann Arbor.
So going back to the duplicates, your report found 7,140 same address duplicates. That's significant because in 2016, there was a 10,704 vote difference for Donald Trump. And if the polling is any indication, Michigan, Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, etc., this potentially is going to be razor thin. And then if you think about, and I interviewed Bob Cushman, who was an observer in Detroit during the vote counting process when there was just chaos when they were counting absentee ballots. And he said as many as 20,000 ballots were just inserted into the machine without being verified. What needs to be done to try and stop that sort of thing?
Well, look, it's not going to be stopped because that's the kind of thing Jocelyn Benson likes to see. And she's the only person who has the power to stop it by issuing clear orders to Detroit, which is like trying to tell they're not listening. They're not paying attention. They don't want to listen. And so I will tell you that she could say you have to follow Michigan law or else don't run those things through the counter. You're supposed to follow the procedures before you just shove them into a counter. And sadly, I've seen that all over the country. When I was at the Justice Department in the voting section, that was one of the notorious ways that elections got cooked, was absentee ballots are just shoved into the counter before they could be verified.
Is that what is really going on here? Because you take a state like Michigan, we've had absentee voting for a long time. I don't know how long, but a long time. People are used to that. But if you go from absentee voting to vote by mail, or you try and put a huge emphasis on absentee balloting, which is what's happening, it's what Jocelyn Benson and Gretchen Whitmer are doing, the system clearly, and we saw this in the primary, and Detroit's a good example, the system is not prepared to handle that. And it doesn't seem like there are the mechanisms in place to be able to handle that in November. So if there's chaos in a state like Michigan, and it's not clear who won the state, and then they declare a winner, but then, maybe somebody else won in Detroit, and it's just sort of chaos, how do you undo a declaration of a winner? How do you, basically undo days after the damage that was done and the chaos that was created?
You can't. It's like cutting down an oak. It's over with. And it's worse than that because it instills skepticism among the body politic about the system, and it's destabilizing. Look, Jocelyn Benson was elected because the people who supported her, particularly her buddy George Soros, who was deeply involved in funding her campaign, those people want chaos. They don't like restraints on the system. They don't like the rules that require you to possibly throw votes out or ballots out that are invalid out of Detroit, because they don't like the idea that anything gets thrown out. You have to understand that. This is an effort to create a direct democracy as much as they possibly can. They're big fans of a new system of voting, and they're not big fans of what the founders had in mind. And so this is just part of the long march through the institution of election integrity. And if Detroit just starts shoving ballots into the counter, I can almost assure you that Jocelyn Benson is not going to get around to saying anything about it.
Right. Now, your report also found that there were 34,225 deceased voters still registered in Michigan. I wrote a story for Breitbart right after, it was maybe a week after the primary election in August, where 846 absentee ballots, were not accepted because the voter was dead. But you're finding that over 34,000 deceased voters are still registered. Why does that matter?
Well, it especially matters in any place where you have this movement toward vote by mail. That's where it matters the most, is just sending. And plus, don't forget, it matters because Jocelyn Benson sent out vote by mail applications to every registered voter, some of whom are dead. And so what does it do? It invites people to say, aha, look, they don't know my brother, my son, my father is dead. Maybe I can just fill out this application. I'll get to vote twice. On top of that, you have U.S. attorneys, even under the Trump administration, who are too afraid to prosecute voter fraud because the FBI officials are either ideologically opposed to prosecuting voter fraud, or they're incompetent because they don't know how to do it. And you have a mix of combustion waiting, where you have these ballots or these applications going out to the dead people you just talked about, Kyle, that are still on the rolls.
Again, the Public Interest Legal Foundation report is titled Critical Condition: American Voter Rolls Filled with Errors, Dead Voters, and Duplicate Registrations. I encourage everyone to read it. Figure out what your local clerk, your Secretary of State, what they are doing to ensure election integrity. J. Christian Adams, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Kyle. Take care.